Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. Are you ready? Do you feel it? That's as much time as it takes for a 7.0 earthquake to completely annihilate a neighborhood. 7 to 15 seconds. We sat through 7. If that had just happened, what would you do? Would you be prepared? Would you have made it to safety? Would you have had a plan? Well, these are questions we should all be asking ourselves because natural disasters are always just a step away. You know the old saying, it's not if, it's when. It's when will the flood happen? When will the landslide happen? And we have been getting a flood of reminders about this lately. So we are going to dedicate the next half hour to talking about emergency preparedness, how counties, states, and federal government interact, and what part of that obligation lies with you, the individual. Because in those first few seconds, you are your only rescue. To get a little background on being prepared, we're going to start with a report from Derek Dowsett.
Not knowing when something bad is going to happen is the very nature of a disaster. But you can practice in a drill like today's Great Shakeout. And practice leads to being prepared. Jeff Johnson knows this better than most because he has actually lived through an earthquake and he knows what it takes to be prepared.
This has always been a passion for me, and that's because of what happened during these few minutes in my life. On June 12th in 1978, I was in Ishinomaki, Japan, and there was a 7.7 earthquake. During the earthquake, a table comes sliding across the room and slammed into the wall, and I thought, well, that's a good place to be. And so I went and jumped underneath the table without holding on to the table, and the table immediately headed back across the room the other way with me crawling after it, which comes to what we teach: drop, cover, and hold. Because people think they can get underneath something and be safe. Well, that something may not stay there in an earthquake.
Events like the shakeout last Thursday are a drill that helps people practice what they would do in an earthquake. Almost 1 million Utahns participated in the event this year. And if you missed it, you can put it on your calendar for the third Thursday in April each year. It's easy to participate in the event by signing up and pledging to be part of the exercise by dropping, covering, and holding on for 60 seconds at a designated time. After that, you practice evacuating to a predetermined area.
Basically, it's just a promotional event, a drill that we set aside a specific date and time that we try to encourage everybody in the state to participate in, to practice that life-saving protective action, drop, cover, and hold on.
As you can see, these exercises are important because they engage the mind and get you in a state where you begin thinking about what you would do in an actual emergency.
So you hold on to the legs of the desk or the table or the chair. Hold on until the shaking stops. And then get out. We'll evacuate. You check on your neighbors, make sure nobody's injured, or provide first aid if anybody's injured. Check your home and see if the home is safe before you enter the home again.
You may have a 72-hour kit, which is certainly a good start, but there is a mental component to being prepared that goes beyond just surviving the event.
The subsequent things that happened during the earthquake is that we had no water, we had no power, we had no gas, and no phone. All the utilities were out. Easily, the make-up plan is probably the most important. If you and your family are separated, how do you get back together? Where do you get back together? Realize the phone lines might be down, so there's going to be no phone communication, either cell or landline. Your communication might not be possible. What's the value of having a plan on that day?
One of the key things that Jeff pointed out to me during our interview was that being prepared at home only covers you half the time. So with that being said, where do you start?
Let's take that 25% chance of being elsewhere. What do you put in the trunk of your car? You need to put in an old pair of hiking shoes or tennis shoes that you're comfortable of walking 20 or 30 miles in. On top of that, put some water in your car, put some edible items that will withstand heat and cold. Find an old coat that you're not using very much anymore and put it in a bag, an old gym bag in the trunk of your car with your boots.
Our primary concern is the preparedness level of the people in general, the public in general. If more people are prepared individually and as families and businesses with emergency plans and emergency supplies and emergency communications plans in place, the better off they will all be. The further our resources will go, and the more people that the state would be able to help.
Being prepared is as much a mindset as actually having a kit that you stow and have ready for when that disaster happens. And being prepared will allow you to protect not only yourself, but perhaps your family and your neighbors. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Now you can sigh a little sigh of relief because you at least have a blueprint of what you need to personally do to be prepared to rescue yourself. When we come back, we'll find out how local, state, and federal governments enter into the picture and are part of the dance. We'll be back with the county seat on emergency preparedness in just a minute.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit cedarcityayl.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic southern Utah.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
I'm a Utah's own dairy producer. I care about the health of my animals, and I care about the quality of food we produce.
Because when it comes to providing quality dairy products,
I understand the importance of Utah grown and raised.
And the jobs we enjoy are vital, because Utah's Own supports our communities.
As a consumer, I look for Utah's Own products, because Utah's Own is good for me, and it's good for Utah.
Keep it here at home, Utah's Own.
We now have the background on what good preparation should look like at an individual level, but we want to go on to the chain of command or the chain of aid and discuss that with our panel today. Joining us for our discussion today is the spokesman from Be Ready Utah, Joe Doherty. We have the Bureau Chief, the Utah Division of Emergency Management, Ty Bailey. And then we have Carbon County's Emergency Management Director, Jason Llewellyn. Thank you for joining us. You know, we've now talked about what you should have. Where does actual emergency service coverage come from? When does it start? What level of government is the guy that shows up at the door to start the ball rolling for you?
I think the best guy to talk about that is Jason, because we talk about how all disasters are local. And so anything that happens in a local jurisdiction, that is the organization that is going to be the first responders. And so maybe you want to talk about a little bit how you guys do that.
For us, an emergency starts usually with a 911 call at the very smallest local level. So at the city level in our county, it starts there. Generally the city responds to the emergency, whether it's police, fire, EMS, flood, what have you. That's where it starts. So with the people local, it's usually a cop at your front door, a firefighter showing up, or maybe an ambulance responder.
Okay, so let's say you know, the volunteer fire department responds to a flooding call in Wellington, and they roll out there and they see when they get there that this isn't just some guy's house. There's a problem. What's the next step?
Generally, the next steps, they call an assisting agency or a neighboring jurisdiction. So Wellington would call Price City. Maybe they need help. With all agencies in Utah, with the exception maybe of the Wasatch Front and St. George, most responders are volunteers. So usually have 4 or 5 show up out of a department of maybe 12 to 15 in the middle of the night.
When do you get the phone call?
Generally after that. Just depends on the location and how it functions, but generally the cities are pretty self-resilient, and you know, they bounce back really quick, and they can handle most day-to-day emergencies. When I get the phone call is when the cities can no longer handle what's been asked of them. That's when they fall back to the county level and we respond. Okay, and then what's the process when your resources become tapped? Because you were almost at that point here recently, weren't you? We were beyond that point, correct. So we became tapped very quickly with the flooding that happened in Helper, Springland, and in the unincorporated portions of the Carbon County. We became overwhelmed almost immediately, within hours. Our next resource was to go regionally, so we rely on our neighboring counties. What offer and what assistance can they have? At that point, exhausting all of our local, if you will, regional assets, we immediately call the state through our liaison program.
Yeah, and the state response happens sooner than a lot of people realize, because we have the Highway Patrol, we have UDOT, sometimes local health departments that are extensions of the state government. So our involvement is right off the bat, but on the emergency management side, then we help with emergency information and additional resources. So whatever the county might be needing in assistance from other jurisdictions, other states, or from the federal government, then we go to work to try and help them with that.
We have about a minute left for this topic, and I'd like to know, you know, you hear about disasters being declared. That just doesn't start at the president and work its way down. How does that system work?
You know, it starts at the other level. It starts at the local level, where if they appear to be overwhelmed, then they make a local state of emergency declaration, which then is often sent to the county. If the county is overwhelmed, they create a declaration and they send that to the state. And each of those declarations is really a legal document that says, yes, we needed help. And whether that help comes, it depends on what requests are being made, but those are legal documents that have to be made. And we want to make sure that people follow those so that the right chain of command is happening.
When the governor comes out and says we're declaring an emergency, that's at the point where there's some serious, I mean, there's a legal document that says the federal government is now being asked to help.
Absolutely, that grants emergency powers to those jurisdictions to be able to function in an emergency situation where they don't have to follow their normal procedures.
Excellent. Well, this is a great place to take a break. We'll be right back talking about emergency preparedness. We have a lot more to cover. If you've got friends that you don't think are ready for an emergency, call them during this commercial break, and we'll see you after our break. We'll be right back.
Why is it that environmental protection and economic development are often placed at odds with each other? In Duchesne County, they have both. Here, modern industry and resource development go hand in hand with some of the most pristine wilderness in the western United States. A strong economy balanced with a lifestyle of exploration and discovery. But don't take my word for it. Go visit them. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
Color, it's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County. Color your experience.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about emergency preparedness. We have a very emergency-oriented panel with us today. We want to pick up the conversation. When we ended our last segment, we were talking about how declarations go forward. Just because a county commission will declare an emergency, does that mean that the help is there in 15 minutes?
You know, some help is already happening. That's the great thing that we actually saw happening in Carbon County, is how many people just came out and started helping with the cleanup. We love that when the communities come together and support one another. But when you're looking for help from the state or the federal government, those declarations, they definitely need to be made. But the first thing I think that people get wrong is they think that when there's a declaration, that means that help is coming and that money is being spent. And that isn't necessarily the case. At the state level, when we request an assessment from FEMA, what they're doing is they're doing a preliminary assessment to see if the damages that have happened, A, are eligible, and B, would meet certain thresholds that exist. So when you hear that, hey, FEMA's in town, it just means that we just need to do some fact-finding first to see if this qualifies for federal assistance.
If a disaster's declared, they're not going to show up with a construction crew and start fixing your house.
No, all things have to be done in order and really in a wise fashion. And having the correct facts will make sure that state and federal and local dollars are all spent wisely and appropriately.
The type of assistance, people have a lot of misconceptions about that. Just because FEMA's going to come, it doesn't mean they're going to build you a new home. And FEMA is the last resort after you've exhausted all other options, including your own homeowner's insurance.
They're not building you the new house. They're loaning you the trailer to live in while you rebuild your house. Is that?
It is, and I think that was one of the large misconceptions that we saw, especially even with local aid, as it starts, as we all know, disasters are declared locally. Even with us at the local level, it's hard for us to venture onto private property and to rebuild as a local government. State and federal laws prohibit even us coming in to help at that level. What we try to do are to offset those emergency needs that you have while you rebuild, just as FEMA does. So whether it's temporary shelters, maybe it's food for a day until you can get power back onto your house, or maybe it's just someone coming to inspect your house while you wait to see if it's safe to go back inside.
Okay, so right now I would imagine there are a whole bunch of people in our audience having an aha moment, maybe not a pleasant one, because they think that the government's role here is to make them whole again, and it's becoming obvious that that's not the role of government. That's the individual's responsibility. So what do they need to do to better be prepared for that happening? I mean, you know, it's what kind of things do they need to be looking out for?
Well, that personal preparedness is so important because government just doesn't have the money to rebuild everybody. And so personal preparedness, looking at your insurance, making sure, yeah, you have homeowners insurance, but do you need flood insurance? Do you need earthquake insurance? And those are some things that people definitely need to be looking at and see if they fit into their family budget.
I agree. I think understanding the hazards where you live is key to this. It would make no sense if you were to live in a hot, dry climate to have ski poles and winter clothing if it never gets below 60 degrees. So you really need to assess where you live in our state, because it's vastly different from an alpine to maybe a desert setting. So you really need to look. There's not a one-size-fits-all with a preparedness or a disaster
probably
kit.
Even within a community. The guy that lives up on the hill is probably in a very different position than the guy that lives down by the Price River.
It is. If you live on top of the hill or do you live in the ravine where there's a flooding issue, that makes a huge difference in how you prepare and how you prepare your family for future events.
Although one other thing when you talk to the floodplain managers in our office, they say everyone lives in a flood zone. And even though it's not a FEMA declared flood plain, everyone has the potential for flooding. And it really doesn't matter where you live in the state, that can happen to anybody.
What else can people do as far as, you know, I can go and review my insurance, but I know I live in an unreinforced cinder block house. That probably doesn't bode well for an earthquake, does it?
No. Not at all.
You guys aren't being very helpful here.
Sorry, Chad.
No. Well, some of the things you can do is, make an effort. We have some CERT programs, Community Emergency Response Team programs, that teach you basic survival skills. Help your neighbor. One thing we were fortunate enough to see was neighbors helping neighbors long before government got there, whether it's police, fire, or EMS. That's where it really needs to start, is being educated and trained at the basic level to deal with those minor problems until someone can get in there to help you.
And I guess you should really become knowledgeable about the assets that you hold as far as real property, and you should know how to shut the gas off and
when to shut the gas off. That's another misconception, is that people think if an earthquake happens, I need to shut the gas off. Not necessarily. If there's damage to your gas line, make sure it's shut off. If you can smell or hear gas escaping, then shut it off. Otherwise, you really have to wait until your gas company comes and turns it back on for you. And that can take a long time.
Most cities and every county in our state has an emergency management program that can help you and identify those areas where you're vulnerable. That's what our job is to assess that, to know that about our public that we serve, and to help them assess the needs that they may have in those different vulnerability areas.
Everything's so individual, and I think just understanding your own hazards, what coverage you do have, and your own situation. When you make your own family plan, it is totally up to the individual, and everybody's circumstance is different. But that mentality of preparing yourself and your own family is the right step.
We have been talking about emergency preparedness. We've kind of now covered some of the areas that are misperceptions. Now what can you do about it? And that's where we will focus our conversation when we come back on the county seat. We'll look forward to the different resources that are available, events that are happening, things that are on the calendar that can help you and me and everybody be better prepared to help ourselves and our neighbors. We'll be right back with the county seat in just a minute.
There are a couple great things about the Uinta Basin. One is it's still small, it's community. It makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody. Well, you know your neighbor knows you, and you can trust each other. People look out for one another.
I grew up in the Uinta Basin, and I think that it's a good place to raise a family.
So we packed up our 3 kids, and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was.
It's not too big, it's not too small.
And it has a lot to offer that you just don't get in the big city anymore.
Imagine a unique, breathtaking cascade misting into the deep pool below. A world-renowned national scenic byway that snakes through some of the greatest views in the world. A canyon painted red by the hands of time. A land that brings the Wild West back to life. And it's all in one amazing place. Here's some advice when visiting Bryce Canyon Country. Take your time.
Remember those good old days? The places you went with your family when you were young? Reinvest in those old memories by making new ones. Beaver County is the perfect place to start that new tradition. Enjoy your favorite pastimes with family and friends. Connect with the history and culture of Utah in a place that's looking to the future. Modern conveniences minus the hustle and bustle of other locales. Beaver County, your adventure starts here.
What's the story of your life? What chapter are you on? Did you happen to get married recently? Perhaps you found your lost puppy at the animal shelter. Or you're taking an art class at the senior center. There's that flu shot that kept you well last season. And don't forget the museums and historical sites your family loves. And all the fun you have at the County Swim Center. County services from search and rescue to maintaining roads bring tremendous value to each of our lives. We're the Utah Association of Counties, helping you build the story of your life.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about emergency preparedness. I hope by now you are taking notes, because this is information that could save your, literally could save your life, and you should follow it. If not, start writing. Write it on the coffee table, wherever you have to. Let me ask some questions. How do people get ready? What's coming up? I mean, it's Emergency Preparedness Month, so obviously we've got to have some kind of event going on.
Yeah, I wish I brought my Santa hat, because this is like our Christmas. This is a great time of year because we get to talk to residents all across the state about what they can do. There's a lot of great information at the BeReadyUtah.gov website, links to preparedness materials, even ways that they can share emergency preparedness on social media. We're very active on social media, and we're getting a lot of people sharing that preparedness information this month. It's a great place for people to start.
Now, I keep hearing about this earthquake drill, this shakeout thing. You got a little detail on that?
Yeah, it's another event that we do every year in April, and so we're just 7 months out from the next Great Utah Shakeout, where we invite every Utahn in the state to drop, cover, and hold on at the same time. So they practice those correct earthquake actions. My friend, Wade Matthews always says that, if you don't know how to survive an earthquake, the rest of your plans aren't going to matter at all. And so, we like to make sure that people know how to do that, and then what to do immediately after an earthquake. And so people can go to shakeout.org/Utah, and they can register to join the next Great Utah Shakeout as well.
So it's those first few seconds that people don't realize that really, that's a good point. If they're not ready for those first few seconds, at how to wait until the ground calms down, they're probably not going to survive, and so it won't matter. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to personal preparedness and family preparedness. Are you ready? I mean, we've identified the earthquakes and the fires and the flooding. Do you know what to do in those key critical first moments that are going to get you by?
You have an analogy about that, don't you?
Yes. Everybody knows the months of the year, and we're taught that from grade school on. And if you want to test somebody, just ask them, hurry, give me the months of the year in alphabetical order, and watch them.
I failed that test, I might add, with the very first month.
Yeah, and that just kind of demonstrates that we have all the information, but sometimes when it's presented to us in a different order, or the world suddenly changes, we lose a lot of confidence in the things that we do know. We know how to get by. It's just those initial protective action plans help you survive the first stages of an incident, and then you can start putting everything back in order.
What can they do locally?
Reach out to your local emergency managers, your local public officials. Most of the counties and a lot of the cities in the state hold their own preparedness fairs every year. We receive money from the state and from the federal government to help put those on, as well as the local tax dollars that come. Most people have a preparedness fair at least every year or maybe every other year within their communities. And it's a great way to learn about everything from fires to flooding to just every day how you can prepare your own families in an emergency plan locally.
Okay, very good. Last thoughts. Let's go through the drill. If it's a flood, what should people do?
Well, people should be prepared to evacuate if they need to, but they should also have some emergency plans in place so they know what they're going to do. That's going to be different for everybody depending on where they live and what their likelihood is of having a flood.
Okay, and what's the rule for earthquakes?
Drop cover and hold on.
And that hold on becomes the important part, I suppose.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, folks, that's just a tip of the iceberg, but you really should be prepared to know every single disaster, what might happen in your area, and have a plan that's memorized so that it's second nature to you. Find out more. Visit the websites, utahprepare.org. You can go to beready.gov.
BeReadyUtah.gov.
BeReadyUtah.gov to find out more. We encourage you to get involved and be prepared. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be prepared and be part of the solution by being prepared. Thank you for joining us on the County Seat. Be sure to share this episode with your friends through social media. Go to our blog. We would love to interact with you on this topic, and we'll see you next week on the County Seat. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4 Utah.